the leader of Mitra's Enterprise Strategy and Transformation Innovation Center. Dr. Derik has over 30 years of experience providing federal government, telecommunications, and financial service clients and strategic planning these clients with strategic planning, complex program management, and performance management. Welcome. Hi. There's several other chairs you can.
That's what happens when you come late. You got to sit up front. You got to sit up front. That's how it works.
He has advanced many federal departments like Homeland Security, Justice Veterans Administration, State and Defense, as well as numerous agencies like the IRS, U.S. Courts. Most recently, he has served as a principal information engineer in Mitra's Cloud Network and Digital Service Engineering Department. Prior to Mitra, Dr. Perry led the consulting practice of training and content development for Vertex Solutions and held programs and product management position with KPMG Consulting, AT&T, and Sprint International. He has his doctoral degree in information systems and communications and successfully defended his dissertation entitled Minding the Mind, the study of governance practices and artificial intelligence in high-stakes applications. His research on AI governance and sense-making practices from multi-frame perspectives. He also has an MBA in international finance and a BBA in marketing from the School of Business at George Washington University. Outside of work, Dr. Perry actively devotes his time to raising scholarship funds and mentoring youth with the Montgomery County chapter of the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity and the George Washington University alumni. He has recently concluded 6 years of service as an executive board member and trustee of the Stonebridge School of the Sacred Heart in Bethesda. There, thank you. So with that, looks like we'll be ready.
Yep. 1 second.
Looks great.
Okay. Here we go.
Present. I've got you up here. Looking great. There's Dr. Miles. There's Miles.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I'm really excited to be here. You don't need to record that. I don't think that'll work actually, because this is on my machine.
Oh, I see.
Thank you for the very warm introduction, Mr. Hernandez. Really appreciate that. I'm very thrilled to be here. I visited your campus only once before, and it was at night, and so I really did not appreciate how pretty it is. So I'm glad to be here during the daytime, and also glad to talk to you about my research, my career, and a few things that I think are important, how I've essentially, I guess, did what I did. And I'm a constant learner, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And since it's Black History Month, there will be a heavy emphasis on cultural awareness.
You hear him? I don't hear him. That's
to kind of drive value in all of our lives, whether you're a student, whether you're a faculty member. The goal is again to make this an interactive conversation. Lock the doors. Is that how we keep you in here? So the goal is to be interactive. Feel free to ask questions along the way. You have me for the hour, and I hope I will fill your attention for that time period. But certainly, if I'm not clear, raise your hand. I'd be happy to chat about something or clarify what have you. And I guess the point too is Dr. Is it Miss or Doctor?
Dr. Hernandez is fine.
I apologize for you this early because as a as a newly minted doctor myself, I love it when people call me doctor. And you don't have to, I only make my wife call me doctor. But I definitely appreciate that, so I apologize. So my discussion really will be a bit emphasis on the research that I've done, which happens to be on the oversight of artificial intelligence and how that relates to my work as well. And the title of the conversation is really making moves with mentoring. And you're really like, wait, really? How does AI and mentoring all work together? What's the importance of that? We will definitely get to that because obviously when I agreed with Dr. Hernandez about participating in here, I had no idea all the interesting dynamics that are going on at New College, which I think are cultural to some extent. And I think, this is really a salient time to talk about mentoring and how that is a culture building exercise. And as I said earlier, I work for the MITRE Corporation, so there is a need to have a disclaimer because these are my own thoughts. I don't represent MITRE in this discussion. And my affiliation with MITRE, as you see in the disclaimer here, is purely for directional and informational purposes. These are my own thoughts. So everyone's seen this before. The deal with COVID-19, I imagine the huge impact on how you learn. Show of hands, what years? First, second, third, fourth? First, third, second, fourth, third. So fourths have really been impacted. Fifth, or what have you. That took me 5 years as an undergrad. And as I said, I just finished my schooling as well. So
my graduates.
Perfect. Oh, wonderful.
That's mine. It's mine. First year graduate.
Oh, okay. All right. In what?
Data science.
Oh, great. All right. So what just as a show of degrees or interest, what are you guys studying? Anybody? We have one data science person. Come on, let's make it interactive.
I do computer science and data science.
Wonderful. Okay.
Then we have a distribution.
Sociology and other studies,
Okay. Wonderful. English.
chemistry.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I have to say that my dissertation, my doctorate, was somewhat sociological. It was qualitative study on the oversight activities of governance agents, and I'll be happy to describe that in detail later on. When looking at high stakes AI applications, so it's relatively timely and so forth. But COVID obviously totally affected the way you learn, particularly those in your third, fourth, and fifth years. First and second years, not so much, but I'm sure it affected you in high school. Yeah, very much. Probably didn't have a public graduation. You were not together with your people. And when you're not together with your people, there's a lot of strife associated with that. And I think we all recognize that. And the tension associated with that was not just for students. Then coupled with this man, does anybody know who this guy is? Anybody don't know who this guy is? Okay. I found out I share a birthday with him. So that was kind of shocking to know. And I was quietly moved when George Floyd was murdered, and I saw it on Instagram. So COVID, George Floyd, those two things continually, bring people to loggerheads. And it's a fact of reality that we all have to deal with. Same thing with mask wearing and recent study of the freedom from indoctrination, local legislation, really, which was about not being told what to think. And I'm sure as critically thinking college students, you don't want to be told what to think and what to learn and how to learn. But all of these instances are, cultural. They're driving people apart. We're not having deep conversations. We're not allowing deep communications with each other. And those are problematic. Everyone's entitled to their perspective and their views on whether or not they should wear a mask or not wear a mask, or whether or not they should keep the doors open of the business or not. And as a doctoral student, I learned that a person's reality is their reality. Sociological perspective is we may not share it always, but you're entitled to your opinion. And hopefully facts can help educate and illuminate broader thinking when you're open to that. So that is something that I learned and emphasized in my doctoral program, which was essentially information systems and communications, even though it was AI focused. So all of this was society. Again, connections between people not happening because of all the angst in the world. And so how do we get beyond that? I have the solution and you're gonna love it. And let's make this a dialogue. Say, do you get it? Do you agree or not? I mean, I'm very happy and open to discourse on this, because what hopefully we will learn together tonight is how to essentially be of two minds, or essentially gather facts that help us differentiate whether or not my internal beliefs really jive with the rest of the world. And so how do we do this? So how do we help solve this issue of not seeing eye to eye or not connecting with others on greater topics? I wanted to use social network theory to help kind of explain that. Has anyone heard of social network theory? What do you?
Sociologist should.
Okay, I won't put anybody on the spot. Anybody want to tell us what we think that's about? Okay, it's essentially, there's multiple layers to it, and it's a theory from 1967, so it predates most of it, probably all of you, except maybe me. Social network theory essentially means, or is a theory by Milgram, Steve Milgram. I think the Daniel Watts was updated in '94. Essentially means that when you have a network of people that is focused around like a hub and spoke, like a wagon wheel. You've got somebody at the center of this wagon wheel who is knowledgeable about something, and they are communicating and sharing information with other people who are the spokes of that wheel, kind of like on the left. And essentially, you can see here, this is the hub. You've got other people who are connecting that way with this spoke. Or this spoke here is another node on the network that is more powerful, more knowledgeable at controlling messaging. And as a result, you have roadblocks to information sharing. And those are weak networks because not all the nodes on the network are informed with pertinent information. Conversely, stronger networks are networks that are more mesh oriented for the maybe the network engineers or anything like that in the room. The more mesh a network is, the more connections you have to other nodes, and thus the ability to communicate, transmit, and receive information. And when that happens, information is more diffuse. And as a result, all the nodes are more inclined, more powerful, more knowledgeable about what's going on. And generally speaking, stronger networks lead to stronger organizations. So the more networked you are, the more connected you are with many people. Doesn't necessarily mean that many people you're sharing the same level of beliefs, opinions, what have you, but it just means that you're able to get information from them, and then getting information is one thing, processing it and understanding where your head is at with respect to the information that you're receiving is another. But if you don't get divergent thoughts, you're not going to get potential ideas. And so you have deeper personal relationships, the opportunity for deeper personal relationships in stronger networks. You have the opportunity for developing shared knowledge more so with stronger networks because there's more connectivity than you would in a weaker network. And you're only going to essentially share with who's sharing information with you on the network. And if you're outside of the communications channel, you're not sharing with anybody in the weak network. And as a result, you have broader influence. Well, you have broader reach in stronger networks, but you have the ability to have more influence in weak networks, which is why some people seek weak networking. When you shut down on communications, fewer people understand things, and as a result, those people that are in the center nodes become more powerful. And it's a tool that many people use in organizations, in social dynamics, and in power structures, whatever power structure they are, whether it's a corporation or government or what have you, or countries. But how does one break that weak network and become more broadly available and more broadly influential? And that's through efforts to gain social capital. So again, with the ability to enhance social capital, you have the ability to broaden your network. And since I was asked to talk about my career and my research, I'm bringing all of these together, hopefully to kind of give you an understanding of how they do relate, because they certainly do. And they relate through mentoring. I know it's kind of odd when you think about it, but what is mentoring? Mentoring is the ability to have a relationship with someone that is focused around imparting knowledge or learning knowledge from that individual so that you can become better and you can upscale yourself in some ways. Or as a mentor, you want to have influence in helping someone else achieve their goals. So mentoring is about getting into a growth mindset, whether you're a mentor or a mentee. But how do I learn and share and broaden understanding? And I think that's super critical. And that's why making moves with mentoring is really my topic today. Because when you're a mentor, when you have a mentor, you have somebody who's much more aware of things than you are. And also more probably aware of who you are to some extent. Mentors have, it gives people feedback. Not mentors give everybody feedback, but they give their mentees feedback. Essentially, you come with an idea, hey, I got a problem I'm trying to fix, or I'm stuck in this job and I want to grow, or I'm studying this and I really want to, study that. How do I get from here to there? Well, mentors are giving you advice on, well, here's your strengths, here are your weaknesses that I've seen, or they may give you feedback on a solution that you're proposing to them. There's lots of values of having a mentor. They're also going to give you, mentors are going to give mentees new ideas. Well, this was what you had suggested you'd like to do. Would you think about also trying this, or as an alternative, try this instead of that? And as a mentee, you now get to deal with a divergent thought. All right, you just learn something in the process of just having a relationship with a mentor. And it makes you more creative problem solver, because you're like, hey, I'm thinking I'm going to do X to achieve my goal. My mentor is telling me to do Y, which I can't stand, doesn't make sense. So maybe I need to come up with a third option. And having a mentor-mentee relationship at least gets you your creative juices flowing. But mentoring is really a two-way street. Has anyone in here had a mentor or been a mentor with anyone? All right, good. Almost everybody's saying well. That's fabulous. So I'm not speaking out of school, so to speak. We can kind of see that. Does anyone agree or have experienced the two-way street aspect of mentoring? Good, because a lot of times, even on my job, I've been involved with multiple mentoring programs, and mentors like to come with the I know how the world works, and you're a student or you're young, and let me fix you. Okay, that's not mentoring. That's being, God or what have you, and that's not mentoring. Mentoring is coming into a relationship with, I'm here to help, I'm here to listen, I'm understanding of what your goals are, and I'm here to give you honest feedback. And I'll talk about the other types of mentoring roles that there are. But essentially, it's a two-way street, because the mentor also ought to be in a growth mindset. So I use he as in me, but the mentor could be of any gender. They ought to be in a growth mindset, so that they are thinking about your growth, and they're also thinking about, well, what am I learning from this mentee? Because they ought to be learning new ways of how things are done. Mentees bring very different thought processes. Young people bring very different thought processes to more seasoned professionals. People from differing backgrounds help other people see things in a different light. So you ought to be hearing new perspectives as a mentor of someone else. And if you're not looking for those, you're not really engaged as a mentor. The mentor also ought to be stopping to focus on, let me fix you, and move towards how can we come up with a solution? How can we understand the problem better and potential solutions to whatever problem that you're looking to overcome? And it's not always problem oriented. There's strategies. The problems can be opportunities to A versus B. So mentors ought to be thinking we, and also mentors in organizations are, by pouring into someone, you're gaining a future ally, someone that can help you down the road make some goal or objective that you're trying to satisfy. But more importantly, it's about recognizing, how do I help others? And that's really what a mentor ought to be doing. And the recognition that comes with being a mentor is, I think, great. Mentors. So here's a couple of examples of folks that were my mentors, starting first with my family. My father, mother, and my older brother were my initial mentors, because they taught me. My father went to college when I was in middle school. And so I often used to see him studying, when I was done with school, late in the evening. And that was not uncommon for me. My mother was a real empath and taught me how to understand people's feelings and to be more concerned with that, which I'm still trying and struggling with. And my older brother taught me how to talk to anybody. And also taught me what not to do. Sometimes that's an anti-mentor. And my other mentor, this guy is George Miles, who I think he might be online before. He was the person who gave me, and that's right, I think he's online. He gave me my first job as a college student, freshman college student, at a television station, which was Channel 13 in New York City, where I was a kid who liked computers, as a freshman, trying to articulate what am I good at? I don't know. But during that time, they introduced this thing called the IBM PC. That's how old I am. Yeah, I know. We get all that. We get all that. But let me tell you about that, because that was my first introduction to mentoring, not just the fact that he opened up a job for me, or said, hey, we might have some needs and an intern. But my job in the MIS department was to unbox these things called IBM PCs and put them on people's desks and show them how to use it, where they were used to using this DEC or IBM, mini computer to reach the mainframe to look at membership or to run budgets and so forth, or to do word processing. They also had secretaries to write things. And so I said, this is an IBM PC. It's going to change everything about how you live and work. And now, of course, we've got computers on our phones everywhere, in our cars. And it was me being a mentor to all these seasoned people who were leaders of engineering, operations, and publishing all across the organization. And I was a freshman in college, and I networked my way around the whole company and found another cooperative education rotation for the next summer and the next summer. And I worked in trade with publishing and accounting, and which I had no interest in any of those things. But I was able to, well, I didn't know that until I tried. But long story short is I was a kid and I was mentoring people on how to use these things. So mentoring happens in a lot of different ways. And I wanted to really emphasize this slide, which this is part of MITRE's Innovation Toolkit, which talks about how do we make organizations innovative. And you do that by having multiple types of mentors and being, it's online. I can share the link with you as well. There are multiple types of mentors, and everybody in the room ought to find every type of mentor possible in their lives, whether you need somebody who's a peer or a friend of yours who could essentially give you advice. A mentor is one of the ways. And that's somebody who is somewhat of a mentor, somewhat of a peer, who can talk to you about, peer views about something. So someone who's close to you, they're a companion or a compatriot, and they think like you do. That level of mentoring may not necessarily be the best type of advice, but you need to make sure that you have some of those in your lives. You have educators who are also mentors because they're teaching you something that you don't know, or they're exposing you to something that you need to learn. They may not necessarily be teaching it to you, but they're helping you grow in ways in your innovation space.
What's the top of the y-axis? Sorry.
Top of the axis is just plain old mentor. Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know how to make that menu disappear. But essentially, it's mentor, champion, authority, and peer. Where a champion is somebody who is singing your praises in places where you're not. So they're advocating for you, they're opening doors for you, they're helping you take your idea and move it into the world. Because generally, we all have goals and objectives we want to accomplish in life. And you're going to need somebody who's going to be your champion. And it's tough to cultivate those champions, accelerators, and authorities because they're the hardest people to reach. But you have to figure out ways to do that. And conversely, if you're in a power authority, we're hoping that you think about, your coming up and how you could have benefited from someone who's connecting you to people, accelerating your ideas, helping you shape and craft your innovation so that you are moving, through sort of a maturity cycle of life. And so mentoring, again, is a very two-way street that requires multiple ways of looking at things. And so whether you're, a student or whether you're a professional, there's always a need to be thinking of others. And your mentors don't have to look like you, and your mentors and mentees don't have to be in the same realm as you. So however they come to you, you need to figure out how to get access to them and think about them. This happens to be all GW affiliations for me from both a mentor and mentee perspective. I say first and foremost in the upper left-hand corner, it's me with my fraternity. It's my undergraduate fraternity, my fraternity, which I'm still a member in, but my undergraduate chapter, which was the New Beta chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha, which is seated at American University, it's now a Metro chapter in Washington, D.C. That was a place that I learned a lot about myself as a person, as well as a leader, and and in a sense of doing for others. Because you're in college, you're really kind of focused on yourself somewhat, and you don't recognize the importance of social action and community service. And Alpha really brought that home for me. I remember I went to George Washington University, but one of the older fraternity brothers gave me a pin from Georgetown's Black People's Union, I think it was called, and the pin said "Know Thyself," and it's an ancient Egyptian inscription on, I can't remember on which pyramid that was found, but "Know Thyself" also has biblical implications as well, where essentially understand yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses, your reason for existence, and where you want to go, because without that, you're sort of meandering through life. And so I was meandering as a freshman, or as a college student. Actually, I didn't play my third year. But so that was an aha moment for me. And I have learned a lot from the fraternity through multiple years, but also at GW, highly involved with community service, even as an alumni. I learned from these three ladies here, who happen to be students, all about physician assistants, which I never thought of as a profession. But I had a daughter who's interested in biology, interested in becoming, or interested in becoming a doctor. And I got a chance to have deep dialogue with her about physician assistants and the pros and cons and her perspective on that, which I learned from these ladies, that we happen to come together as mentor mentees through a community action, community involvement event that GW had. And lastly, a friend of mine who invited me to be an advisor to the president of GW from an African-American perspective. And this gentleman, Lamar Thorpe, worked for the Alumni Association and said, hey, we're active at GW at this time, and we'd like to get somebody with this perspective from the 80s to 90s. And I was thrilled by the opportunity to do that. And even more so is that I was helpful to him on helping him navigate the university power structure or administrative structure. Even though he was an employee, he didn't have that wherewithal sort of how to act and work politically, which has dramatically changed because he's now the mayor of a town in California. Yeah, you know Lamar? You heard of Lamar? I'm trying to remember the town. I can't believe I'm drawing a blank on it. But he's grown. And I would say not in part because of me. At MITRE, I do a lot of mentoring still as well. I think I was mentioning to some folks, I started this organization called the Black Culture Network at MITRE with this affinity group that essentially expanded to be many things where we put on events to help all of the company understand Black culture. MITRE's a system engineering company, so there's a lot of engineers, and you know you're talking to an extroverted engineer because that person might be looking at your shoes, but he's talking to you rather than looking at his own shoes. Yeah, we're engineers, we don't get out much, and our jokes are bad. You know? But there's lots of opportunities to do that. So when you think about finding mentors, don't think about people that look like you. Don't think about people that share your own belief systems. Think about people that are in positions that you want to be in, or that have knowledge that you are not aware of, or places that you think you have gaps. Because if you do that, you're more likely to find the right type of mentor. And generally, you know, that's that. This is a little bit more politics around Alpha Phi Alpha. I will say real briefly that as a member in college that has continued throughout life, when I graduated, I joined a local chapter, an alumni chapter, and happened to be working on Capitol Hill, working on the telecom infrastructure for the Senate. And I ran into some fraternity brothers who were walking hallways trying to get the National Capital Planning Commission to extend an idea that we had for building a memorial on the mall to Dr. King. And that idea was the King Memorial. It started in the Silver Spring chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha. And I was super thrilled to take time out to participate in that, to understand the lobbying process, which I had no interest or awareness of before. But I learned, continued on through membership development activities. And this young man, Rod Hart, was one of our scholarship awardees, who's now working in the office of another fraternity brother who happens to be a senator, the only Black senator in Georgia, or a Black senator, Raphael Warnock. So again, it's all about trying to open doors for each other, understand where our gaps are, and understand how do we close those gaps, because we all have those gaps. And now I want to pivot a little bit to the AI space, because there's nothing but gaps in thinking about AI. And my research, which was qualitative, really focused on how do people make decisions about AI? Are they generally knowledgeable of AI? Do they understand their biases associated with those decisions, or how that AI may be biased in itself? And I find that super important because as a consultant to the federal government, lots of times we're helping the government acquire technology, goods, and services that vendors are trying to push down their throats. And they're not always going to be upfront with how do they do that, or what's the puts and takes associated with the technology. And the government is trying to get something done quickly. And they've got a problem to solve. And their problem, they're looking at this problem like that, you know, with blinders on. And are unaware of the complexity that AI puts into the realm of things. And if you're using AI for high stakes decision making or decision support, it becomes even more critical. And we are all interacting, and my research shows that we're all interacting with AI much more than we have in the past. And we often don't recognize that it's doing so. Come on in. Hey, there. Come on in. Wheels out chairs. Glad to see you. It is a hard time to find. So I'm pivoting now, no worries, I'm pivoting now to with this course about AI oversight. So we're all operating in ways where we are interacting with AI more than we realize. AI can be used to apply for a loan. Oftentimes, the AI is looking at how you filled out the application, what you said on the application, how long it took you to fill out the application, what did you omit from the application, what did you skip, and it's making decisions about you and your credit worthiness. AI could be, well, here's 3 examples on the far left. There's an IRS example. There's where essentially during COVID, the IRS shut down all of their customer service centers where people go get help for taxes. And of course, taxes are very easy. Nobody needs help with those, right? So when they shut those down, people still needed help, but you needed to be able to verify, am I talking with the right person? Do you have authorization to actually speak about this account? All those wonderful things. So they instituted a facial recognition program, which was really done poorly, wasn't thought through, created a lot of inequities with people because we all know that facial recognition is flawed. You know, every time you try to use your facial recognition to open up your phone, and your phone knows you probably very well, much better than the IRS does. And so there's flaws with that, and if you didn't, you know, validate your face with the IRS, and I can't talk to you about this account, well, that was not a winning solution. The next example is Russian killer drones used in Ukraine war, generally from Iran, but you know, drones are available on all sides of all wars, and when a autonomous thing is making a decision, do I land on you or do I land on you? You know, those are ethical decisions. And, you know, there's no wins in that situation. And then there's the thought about the Chinese using AI and involved with essentially what companies we are allowing to do business with us and take U.S. information in China, because their approach to gathering data, to using data to make decisions is very different, very not people-centric like we are in the U.S. and certainly not like they are in Europe. Which are much more advanced than the U.S. with respect to privacy and the ability to turn off, to leave, be forgotten, which is significant. So my research says that AI is more powerful than it's been in the past through cloud computing that continues to grow. That AI is ubiquitous, but often don't know when we're interacting with it, and that AI is everywhere. And so as the use cases for AI expand, and AIs are becoming less narrowly focused and more generally have more broad capabilities of the Chat GPT, that has pretty broad implications. So if you get it wrong, there's a lot more people using it than just perhaps the people that were using the credit application, which is a very sort of tight population. So if you get it wrong, you're affecting a whole lot more people. And if governance, and so there are multiple governance agents in the development stack of AI. So my theory of a governance agent is someone who has the influence over the development of AI, whether it's in the gathering of the data that's used for the algorithm, whether it's the code for building the algorithm, or whether it's someone who has a budget that controls a development organization, who's not into the weeds. They all are agents of change and influence over the development of that AI. And so multiple people can have material big impact on the development of these tools. But they don't all have deep insights into the development, into the biases that were perhaps introduced into the data. They are concerned with narrow focuses. And because they don't have more uniform framework for evaluating AI, then there's more likelihood that these things could go wrong. And the more high stakes these applications become, ChatGPT is fun, but if you're using it to create job requisitions for hiring people, or if you're using it to create code that builds something that could be in a high stakes area, then you're very likely to impact somebody negatively, and negatively, right, their civil liberties, you can inflict harm upon them by not granting them a loan that keep pointing to that application. You could affect somebody's livelihood, their finances, their civil liberties, or their mental well-being as well. So, and we all know that AI has been used ubiquitously in social media, because what you see in your feed is driven directly by an algorithm that was essentially AI. And we can go on for days about how social media really is both a joy and a scourge on society. So with that, we were talking about mentoring earlier. How the heck does mentoring work with AI oversight? But it works in a lot of different ways. So as I mentioned earlier, that mentoring can help people understand hidden equities, who's at stake here and what do people find valuable. If I'm living in a box and I'm not open to ideas, I don't have a growth mindset, I am not going to be thinking about whether or not you get negatively impacted by a credit application, or if you get insulted by a response that ChatGPT says, or it doesn't recognize you as a woman and calls you a man, or whatever, not you, or you, but those are all opportunities for failure that have an implication. Through mentoring, you are developing diverse thinking, at least among pairs of people. So, welcome. You're developing growth mindset. So people that are thinking more broadly about ideas. You're upscaling the capabilities of a governance agent. So if you're in a decision mode or position and you're a narrow thinker, you're going to create poor solutions. And in my world, the more creative the solutions, the more capable the technology is being deployed. And more importantly, while we need to be creative and open thinkers in AI, the speed in which AI technology changes is really different than traditional technology because you can build an algorithm that learns how to do something, make a decision, and it can change by adding new data to the equation that, or excuse me, to the training of the data. The training data that is used to execute the algorithm. And simply by adding new data, you created a new tool than what existed before. And with that, people are taking tools that were meant for one thing, adding new data and expanding it, and expanding the capability of it without necessarily thought or concept around whether the data used to build or inform the algorithm was free from bias, was representative of the people who are going to be either stakeholders of the AI tool or users of the AI tool. And so mentoring can help with the upscaling of agents, make sure that the governance agents and developers are thinking more broadly, and that can positively impact the whole development cycle of AI. So that's essentially the crux of why mentoring applies here. It's a sociological term, but it's super critical. And I want to just leave with one last remark, which is John Lewis, who spoke about his mentor, which was Martin Luther King. John Lewis was the congressman from Georgia, who, as I mentioned earlier, Raphael Warnock replaced. And his mentor was Dr. Martin Luther King, who invited him to speak at the March on Washington because of his efforts during the student nonviolent coordinating committee. Thank you. Who said essentially everyone can be great because everyone can serve. And if you're in that mindset of how do I do for others, you are in a mentoring mode and you're open to diverse thought and you're open to how do I help make the world better, not just my lives. And with that, I'll take questions if you have any. And thank you, my family, for coming.
I do have a question. And that is, what is the role of human being in time?
There's lots. Yeah. So I was saying earlier that there's this notion of governance agent. Somebody who got influence over AI. And that in my research, I interviewed governance agents in multiple areas of development. So I interviewed people who are building algorithms, and people who are gathering data for algorithms, people who manage the development organization, people who were consumers, who buying essentially an AI service and then using it in their world, like network operations, SOC operations, or big consumers of AI so that they can detect fraud or figure out if an attack is coming from a legitimate source or just noise on the network. So humans play a role in lots of places. And in particular, one has to think about ethics in AI. And the ethics are, is somebody harmed in the AI? So you have to be considerate of who's using it, who was the source of the data to train the AI, and ethics is essentially the notion of was anybody harmed in this process, and then you could say no, then it's a activity. So you have to think about people from a user, from a buyer, and from a source perspective.
What are some of the successful and non-successful initiatives you've seen in governing AI?
I'm trying to do more. One of the things I saw that's kind of really interesting is the use of cards. So there's a notion that from a development cycle, you develop a card that says it's kind of like like you decide a cereal box. It says, you know, this is a serving size, how many calories are in there, and how much salt, sugar, and all that. There's in the development world, there's a notion that a card will say, here's not just the serving size and how many calories, but here's what that algorithm was built for, what its intent was, and the source of the data necessarily used to develop it. And so that you can basically be disclosing and say, it works for this. You know, it may not work for this, but we can say it works for this. And that is a really good practice. That's a beginning, but not necessarily the end all be all, because I still think that people who develop a card or organizations that develop cards to describe their AIs are only going to give you but so much information. Yeah, Facebook doesn't tell you what really my AI is or how that feed differs from Instagram feed. More of the Facebook to
Like, do you have any concerns when it comes
Yes.
to like data sets and privacy and also intellectual property?
Well, as I said, the cards are not going to describe
Yeah.
the intellectual property, which is the building of the algorithm. The concern about data sets is huge. There's a woman by the name of Timit Jabru, I always pronounce her name wrong, used to work for Google, got fired unceremoniously from Google. And they're saying that she broke practices, you know, intellectual property practices by disclosing something. When in fact, well, not say in fact, another opinion or another perspective on it is that Google didn't like what she was saying in her most recent research with other Google people and outside researchers, which was that large scale data models are inherently bad for society because they take a lot of computing power and resources to process, because they are, you know, who knows what the quality of that data is. It's just a lot of data. And that by using empowering it, you know, you're affecting the world, when in fact it's not a good practice. And I think that's kind of what her research about stochastic parroting was. I can't remember the exact. Yeah, I'm sure you know it.
I know what I don't remember her name, but I know what you're talking about. That was a huge scandal. After that, Google released basically a governance initiative saying, oh no, we're gonna like step in the right direction, making sure that AI and data collection has a good governing foundation like that. It's like, oh, okay.
But to be honest with you, their real governing practice I really look for, because this happened when I was like my second year of my dissertation. So this is my data gathering, and I was trying to find really behind the shell. And I looked at this Singapore governance model, which is really advanced. China, believe it or not, has a really robust AI ethics.
Censorship, right? That's strong.
Yeah, I mean it is robust and deep and really good. You know, we can learn a lot from that. But I didn't catch you up.
Yeah, no, it's like environmental is definitely an issue. Like even with other technologies such as like blockchain and like the amount of like storage that it requires, the amount of like data like transferring, but then also storing. Like it's a lot, and it's not just like in the cloud. It's also like literal servers and like pollution and all of that stuff too.
You're absolutely right. And interesting, GPT-3, when I was looking at it, during my research for my dissertation, which is a precursor to ChatGPT, was essentially the same tool without guardrails. And ChatGPT has a lot of guardrails. So ChatGPT, for everybody that doesn't know, is a tool that is released into the world by OpenAI, which essentially allows you to have conversations, kind of like, remember how Google used to complete your thoughts as you're writing a Google search, find me pizza near me, and it would figure that out. Well, ChatGPT is much more conversational and provides you with much richer responses, and it's built off of a huge, language model, and nobody knows how big the database that it was trained on actually is. But we do know that ChatGPT had over 2 million variables in the algorithm, so not a human being can keep track of what the hell is going to come out. ChatGPT has more, which is kind of scary in the capability of it.
I'm curious to know if qualitative analysis found its way to you or if you found it.
So my initial instant, my desire was to do a ground theory research, which is both qualitative and quantitative. And now the quantitative would have been harder to get at that data because we need a lot of it to make it generalizable to validate your theories. And so I was gravitated towards the path of least resistance, which is qualitative, but no less important because you get as many humanities students know, the lived experience is very valuable because you're articulating in depth what people are using, going through, and their experience, such that it may not have been exposed before. So again, back to the mindset. So you're not sharing, you're living in your little bubble, you're not having a mentor or group-oriented relationship, you are not going to be aware of things of importance.
I guess, I'm just going to switch up a little bit and ask you about your stance on mentorship. You mentioned sort of not sure if this was one of your research about the structure of mentorship, and you know that great model you showed. In terms of, let's see it again. In terms of groups or companies.
Yeah. I'm listening. Go ahead.
Groups, companies, organizations. What role would you either suggest or utilize in terms of structures they can put up that would encourage the structure like this for employees, like that way establishment of a group of mentors?
It's a hard thing to do.
Is it common? Have you seen it commonly done?
So before the conversation started, I was sharing that I started this organization at MITRE called the Black Culture Network, which is sort of an affinity group where just folks would bond together and sort of peer mentor each other. That was the initial intent. Earlier in my MITRE career, I was involved with a program called One MITRE Mentor, which was a structure to do three things. It's just to support the bonding of one-on-one, the making of one-on-one connections, because you need to find a pool of people who are interested in being mentors, find a pool of people who are interested in being mentored, match them, validate that those relationships are working, do they need to get switched out, that kind of stuff. It's a hard thing. But there were other vehicles for mentoring that One MITRE Mentoring did. So that aspect is hard. It's important to do. Sometimes takes software, because it's kind of like social, it's like dating, Sometimes a mentoring relationship should be good and quick and done, and sometimes you want it to continue. But the other modes of mentoring were not described in this model, but there are many to many mentoring. And being involved with that, I started this kind of talks, which were people would talk around you have a talk around a subject, you have an audience, and I would facilitate with the group many to many mentoring sessions, which is what did you learn? What was valuable about the conversation? Can you apply this? How can you apply this, what you heard today, to your daily lives? At my, in dealing with customers and problems. And so it was a many to many discussion. And that was like, it really kind of took on it. Some of our topics for many to many mentoring sessions were, how to overcome the fear of being a non-expert, or how to, we were constantly looking for work internally. Because as a consultant, you've got to be chargeable, to an external customer. If you're out of work, you can only do that for so long and keep you out the door. I mean, the reality of the business. And so it's a stigma. You lose your project or whatever. So how to overcome that stigma was a big thing. And then lastly, it's just the culture building in itself, by trying to get people to be open, to be psychologically safe, so that they feel that they can come into an environment and have an opinion and to share. Because if you don't feel that you can share your opinion, you're not going to bring your full self to the problem. So our goal is to try to do all those things, try to touch on all of those.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. So you talked about like this, the social dimension of AI, the cards, mentorship. There's like this through line of like developing more perspective and a better understanding of what's happening as like the key to, getting where you need to go. Do you think that AI should ever be making, as opposed to guiding decisions, given that an algorithm, its understanding of the world is always going to be limited? We can't grow the person.
In the military, they call that having a human in the loop. Meaning that, the AI makes a decision, but a human has to validate it and say, I'm going to do that course of action or not. They're more advanced than industry. Industry is about, I got a problem to solve, I'm going to solve it. And if something, they're not always going to be thoughtful about having a human in the loop, or having a human in the loop may, counteract a recommendation that the AI would make. So, it's something that it's situational. So, should always AI have a human in the loop? I do believe that there ought to be, a reject button or off ramp when people implement these tools. And so I believe that we have to figure out when that is applied, but I think there always needs to be an off button. Particularly when you start building robots, like what's the movie now? Or no, it's the woman. And yeah.
The horror movie.
Right, she initially was okay, and then she just kind of lost her senses and went totally out of control.
Yeah. Well, it's like the AI is supposed to look after you. So, you built this tool that says, I'm gonna make sure you eat, pray, and exercise. You start doing that, is it going to intercede and not allow you to eat the food of your choice? for somebody of this sort. So do you want it to rule your life or do you want it to influence your life?
Let me ask you this, what role do you think artificial intelligence is going to play military wise?
In ways that are currently, so saying, the drones that are being deployed in Ukraine, there's lots of drones that are being are released, and they're not necessarily remotely piloted, like the big US drones that are like airplanes that are doing bombing, not in Ukraine, but that were used in like Afghanistan and so forth. These drones are much smaller, cheaper, and they're not remotely steered. So AI is being used to say, it is being used to help select targets, or richness of targets, so that it can decide on, where things should be deployed, or where it's going to inflict harm. Yeah. Question.
So I'm trying to understand a little bit more about the mentoring piece. So is your vision that those involved in the governance, so those, at all levels, engage in mentorship so that they are more critical and careful with the way they design the AI? Am I understanding your thesis here?
That is indeed my thesis.
Okay,
Yes.
you're saying
By
that
being-
people who are separated from each other when they're developing these tools?
What I'm saying is that people aren't aware and considerate of all the evaluative criteria when making decisions. So my research was very specifically on what criteria people are using and how they use tribal leadership as a means of evaluating their sense-making process about that criteria. So generally criteria are, what's the cost of the AI, what's the cost to build, what's the cost to sustain it, cost to feed the AI. Are there ethics? So was someone harmed in the use of the AI or the building of the gathering of the data didn't necessarily make the AI? Is there sufficient data? Is another criteria. Do you have the technological expertise in the organization so that you can sustain them? And quite a few others that are, COVID, general technology evaluation things, but where AI is different than general technology is, as I mentioned, you can add data to the training of the AI, which then makes it a different product, and boom, you have a new release that is significantly different than something that exists before. And so because these people don't have breadth of understanding or consideration of that, and these people are governance agents, that no matter where you are in the stack, whether you're an organization owner who has broad financial capability or oversight, or whether you're deep in the development, closet, coding, you are a governance agent. And then tribal leadership, which is Dave Logan theory, basically says that there's like 5 levels of maturity to a tribe, and a tribe is anywhere from 20 to 150 people that kind of come together around something. So we are human beings, we form tribes, and it's kind of general. And in organizations, the more successful tribes are the ones that share information more. If you're a level 1 tribe in tribal leadership, then you are, you feel like that you're subjected to by the world. You have no control of your life in the situation. If you're a level 2 tribe, you are, hey, I'm great, and you're not. And so we're competing. And if you're a level 3 tribe, you might start to form relationships and say, hey, let's together make this happen, and not worry about everybody else. And as you move up the food chain in the tribal leadership theory, and this actually reminded me to bring this up. This notion of independent study, which I think is like core to New College. That's a real mature tribal leadership approach to things. Because, being a liberal arts institution, we need to think broadly and learn broad subjects, not just I'm a biology major or I'm a physics major. You're thinking about how does physics relate to biology, or how does physics relate to social dynamics or something. And by building those relationships between tribes, where tribes not just create bilateral groups, but maybe trilateral groups, then you're getting back to the real strong networks. And so the more you do that, the more likely you are to have a higher functioning organization. And by nature of doing independent study, you're kind of doing that. Maybe, where is that? Boom. Yeah, so that's my notion. And so by doing mentoring, you're gonna deepen your network connectivity. It's gonna be less bilateral and more trilateral or multifaceted. And by doing that, you're gonna deepen enhance your understanding, you're gonna deepen your view of the world, you're gonna get new ideas in that will challenge your current way of thinking. And you may say, I'm still right, but you're at least gonna have new ideas to bounce off your own.
So. I was just thinking, it's getting a little bit late and we have a class that needs to probably step out. But other people can stay if that's okay. I don't want to abuse your time.
I'm happy to answer some more questions, but schooling is important.
Just excuse the group of the class to step out and then please.
Any questions online?
Yeah, and I put some in the chat, but it doesn't look like anyone's
Okay.
giving us any questions here. Hey.
Hey, George. Well, I thank you everybody for your time. Thank you for coming.
Thank everybody else.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think that's it.
You want to?
Yeah. Have a good night online. Sure.
Here. Look. I'm just curious that you're.
Nice job, Derek.
See you afterwards. Okay.
I didn't develop it, but then it's from the miter tool.